What's going on, you guys? This is your boy RBG, aka the Random Black Gamer, bringing you something a little different on the channel than I usually do, and it's going to revolve around X-Men 97. That show has been killing it on Disney Plus, and it has a lot of people talking for all the right and wrong reasons, and today I'm going to cover most of the wrong reasons, because there's honestly a lot to talk about in that regard, and I can't help but feel like all the vitriol that this show gets is unwarranted, especially from people who haven't even taken the time to watch the show. Like, the biggest criticism that it's gotten is in regards to its animation, and I'm going to be talking about how this animation is actually good and does a phenomenal job of honoring the previous incarnation that it's based after. But before we do that, y'all already know what I gotta ask you. I want to ask you guys to do me the biggest favor and like this video. Yeah, I know it's annoying getting that request at the very beginning of the video before you watched it in its entirety, but YouTube's algorithm encourages it. So if you rock with your boy and you know I'm going to bring you that awesome content, then smash that like button. And if by any chance you find yourself making it to the end of this video and you feel like you wasted 10 minutes of your life that you can't get back, then by all means, retract that like and give it a dislike. Just rate the video. But yeah, guys, as I was saying, the X-Men animated series is back with the latest entry titled X-Men 97, which, as the title implies, is a continuation of the original animated series, which ended in 1997. If you were one of the ones lucky enough to grow up in the 90s, then you know that the X-Men were a big deal, especially during the Chris Claremont and Jim Lee run of the comic books. As we speak, 1991's X-Men issue number 1 remains the highest selling comic book issue of all time, selling an outrageous 8.1 million copies. Funny enough, its spin-off X-Force issue number 1 sold 5 million copies that same year, making it the second best-selling comic book of all time. From comic books to video games, the X-Men were undoubtedly a dominant force in the 90s, and its biggest crown jewel, that delicious frosted layer on an already delicious cake, would have to be the 90s animated series. Even those who weren't really watching the series still remember that iconic theme. We had a stellar cast, the story and character designs were based after the Jim Lee run of the comics, and everything was perfect, man. So as you can imagine, once we got this X-Men 97 announcement, we knew that this series had a lot of living up to do if it wanted to be anything close to the original. Like, one small thing could offset this whole entire project and have the internet in a frenzy, which is inevitable. Like, you guys already know that some of these internet marks or these rage baiters, they're gonna find something to be outraged about. I'm not sure if it releases the endorphins in the brain, but there's just something about being mad over the most small, minute things that makes people just want to rage out and complain. So I pretty much knew before this thing was gonna drop that we were gonna have a lot of people complaining about something, which, I gotta be fair, Disney really doesn't help things. Like, if you guys haven't noticed, they've been producing a lot of mid to low tier projects because they are the house that runs essentially everything in terms of entertainment. So I can understand why people were apprehensive, but the fact of the matter is, whether this show was good or not, there was going to be that anti-SJW messiah who was going to lead his lost legion of sheep into that rage-fueled fire. When you're in that position of power and you're headed down that path to destruction and you know that there's no going back, you have to ride the griff wave, and you have to make sure that you find something that's going to have people infuriated. And one of those things just so happens to be the animation. I know there have been other facets to this show that's kind of come under fire, such as the director saying that Morph is non-binary.
Logan? One too many redheads for you. Here, need some help with those hard to reach spaces.
But I want to focus your attention on the animation, because that's been a thing that's come under major scrutiny from a lot of longtime fans. So I guess you can say that this is an issue that exists outside of that anti-SJ realm and more so in the nostalgic one. And I will admit that I had my own expectations in regards to what I wanted the animation to look like. Back when I watched the original 90s series in its totality, I will admit that there were some things that I wish could have been done a lot better, but I know that the studios that were tasked with animating these episodes were on a very tight schedule, so I can't be too mad at that. Overall, they delivered some pretty solid animation, and to this day I think that the X-Men animated series has one of the best openings That's until decades later when I discovered that Japan took it upon themselves to make their own versions of the openings when they actually aired the show, which are nothing short of amazing. I feel like these animated openings do an excellent job of not only showcasing what Jim Lee's artwork could look like in motion, but showing us just how much more awesome they can make the X-Men be, which I feel like the Japanese just know how to do better than any other area in the world, because we've seen that with some properties like the X-Men side-scroller beat 'em up, and then you have all the different spin-offs that span from things like Children of the Atom, which was produced by Capcom, which is a Japanese company. So that was what I was expecting to see with X-Men 97, where they just hired these awesome animators from Japan, whether it be something like Madhouse or maybe Mappa, to actually bring Jim Lee's creative panels to life and in motion. But that's not what we got. What we got was this. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when I saw this artwork revealed, I was very disappointed. And if I'm gonna blame anyone, I can only blame myself, because as I said, my expectations were high above the cosmos. I really wanted this thing to look like those Japanese animated openings, especially considering the fact that there are no limitations nowadays. We have all the technology we need in order to make these things look very crisp and very fluid with its animation. But I thought it was very important to take into consideration that this was an image. I was looking at the design for the characters. I wasn't necessarily looking at the animation, because animation is a thing where something is in motion. You're seeing it in action for the first time by way of being drawn or painted on these celluloid sheets, i.e. cell animation, which was the method used to bring the 90s animated series to life. Just thought I'd put that out there, since I've seen a lot of people confuse art/design with animation. They're two different things, and if you ask me, I may have judged those images unfairly based on my preconceived notions on what I thought the animation was going to look like. So I thought I'd wait to base my opinion on what I saw in the actual trailer, which to my surprise was awesome. I felt like it captured the essence of the 90s series, and I also thought that it felt like a 90s cartoon that I would watch on a Saturday morning. But even I will admit that there were a few glaring issues that I had a problem with, which I think is largely due to Marvel's marketing team not picking the right shots to show for this series. For whatever reason, they edited in a lot of shots where the characters would just be standing still and talking as opposed to being in action. Not to mention, it made it hard to decipher what techniques they used to animate this thing, because there are a lot of shots that makes it look like it was animated in 3D using cell shading. And when I thought about making this video, I tried to go out of my way to contact some of the people that were directly involved with the animation process, and as you can expect, when I messaged them, I didn't really get any responses back, because I'm pretty sure they're very busy with a lot of other projects outside of this one, so it's totally understandable. But I wanted to make sure I did my due diligence of understanding what exactly went into the production for this show, and I wanted to answer one big question that a lot of people had. Was this show 2D classical animation, or was it done with 3D cell shading? Because a lot of fans, including myself, felt like it was the latter. There are certain movements that just look weird, like they were done using 3D. But before we got an answer to that, I wanted to understand the overall creative direction the showrunners were going for, and as I suspected, it was to encapsulate everything that was great about the 90s series, and that started with the aesthetics. According to the show's executive producer Brad Winderbaum, it was all about trying to capture the essence and the overall aesthetic of the 90s series. He said, and I quote, "The plan was never going to be, let's make a new X-Men show that takes place in 2024, and we're going to redesign them and make them cool for today. Instead, the more exciting opportunity was to work within the parameters of the 90s, which makes it feel like new, even though it's old." So as you hear, X-Men 97 is very much a spiritual successor to the original, and the showrunners were determined to make it feel like we never left that series. And upon reading this, I knew that they were most likely going to have some difficulties replicating that, because like I said, the process of animating things back in the 90s would be considered very primitive compared to how we do things today. When you're using modern day technology to replicate methods from the past, you're bound to have mixed results, and I feel like that's the thing that makes X-Men 97 a bit jarring and confusing to those who can't quite put their finger on what style of animation it is. Although it's being produced by the same people that brought you Marvel What If, which is a series that's notorious for using 3D cel shaded animation, I can gladly confirm that this show really doesn't use that much 3D at all. It actually uses 3D in ways that other 2D animated shows does. I couldn't find an official report on this, but I was able to actually pinpoint this by way of one of the supervisors that worked on the animation, and it all started with my guy Chris McFeely stressing how he didn't really like the whole 2D filter over the CG animation approach, to which one of the animation supervisors, Jeremy Polgar, pointed out that this was in fact a traditionally 2D animated show. And I already know some of you are going to say that he's only saying that because he is associated with the show, so he's going to shill as hard as he possibly can, but I was able to find some tweets from an actual animator slash VTuber who knows the process of animating and how to distinguish from 2D and 3D. And he basically says what I said about how this show tries to replicate the animation from the yesteryear by using modern day technology, which is bound to have mixed to downright jarring results. Some of the most notable things is that the lines are a lot cleaner and the colors are a lot more richer than that of a 90s series, which is why it gives off the illusion that it is 3D, but it's not. When it comes to 2D drawings, the outlines remain consistent, while on a 3D model with a shader, the outlines can end up clipping or thinning. And apparently the only time this show really utilized 3D animation was in the first episode revolving around the jet scene, where the Sentinels destroyed the Blackbird and the X-Men had to figure out a way to land safely. Like in this epic superhero landing, you can clearly see that Beast has been cel animated just so he can give off that fluid movement, but it just looks a little jarring. Since technology is on a hyperbolic curve and they can essentially do what they want, they can kind of step out of those parameters to do these awesome shots that they couldn't do before, but they try to dial it back as much as possible by masking those modern day cosmetics which we would consider blemishes, because once again the objective is to make it look like it was made in the 90s, and one of the tricks they used to evoke the look of the original series was placing filters over the animation. Not 3D filters, but a VHS broadcast transfer filter. Have you guys ever wondered why we never gotten a remastered version of X-Men the Animated Series on Blu-ray, or wondered why the quality looks so low res on sites like Disney Plus? Well, that's largely due in part to the process of how they produced these shows back in the 90s and the earlier years, which was VHS broadcast transfer, which is a process used to get these things out to TV broadcasters in a timely manner. You see, back in the 60s and 70s, shows were shot, edited, and mastered on film reels. They would then take those masters and transfer them to videotape for TV distribution. However, by the time the 90s rolled around, it became a lot faster and cheaper to just edit these shows on VHS. Don't get me wrong, they would still be shot on traditional film, but to speed up the process, they edited and mastered the rest on VHS. And as you can imagine, a lot of the original quality was going to get lost in those transfers, which brings me to another point. When a lot of people ask why this show looks bad or why they can't find a good high quality remastered version of it, it's because of that fact. There's also the whole thing of not preserving the official film masters. In most cases such as that one, a lot of those things were thrown away after they were edited onto VHS, which I know some of you find hard to believe since we live in an era where DVDs and Blu-rays exist, but those things weren't really thought of back during that time. There was no preserving a film master and knowing that you were going to digitally restore and remaster this thing for a dual layer disc. It was all about editing and getting the VHS out to the TV broadcasters. Once they were finished with that VHS broadcast transfer, they got rid of those film masters. So whenever you're looking at a cartoon from the 90s such as X-Men the Animated Series on something like Disney Plus, you're getting the best quality that they have to offer with that series. So it doesn't matter where you look, it doesn't matter if you get an upscaled version of it, you're still gonna get that same outcome of this standard definition 1-inch broadcast VHS transfer quality, where the colors are crushed, you get those weird scan lines and janky images where the lines don't really line up properly, which is all due to them not having the original film masters and only having these VHS transfers. And the showrunners from X-Men 97, they try to replicate that, but since it was so bad and janky back in the day because of those VHS transfers, it's a lot harder to do because, like I said, we're dealing with modern day technology, but I think the filter does a good job of muting the colors to make it look look like it did in the 90s. I'd say the only thing that I would have done to add to this atmosphere, and I still don't understand why they didn't do this, was make the show in a 4:3 aspect ratio. But moving on, the final thing that I want to talk about in regards to this animation being bad when it's actually good is how well it matches up with other things that the animators used back in the 90s, which are still image shots. One of the most notorious criticisms I've seen towards this show is the fact that people claim that the animation looks like flash animation, which is a low quality, low effort method where the characters just sit still and they talk to each other. We've seen this technique used in shows on Adult Swim such as Aqua Teen, Hunger Force, and Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. One of the most notorious shows that uses this method would have to be Archer, which a lot of fans compare this show's animation style to. And believe it or not, that style of animation was done deliberately for this show to emulate what was done from the 90s show. As much as you guys would argue the fact that X-Men the Animated Series was peak animation, it really wasn't. There was a lot of things that the showrunners had to do to offset the cost and time put into the production. Larry Houston, who was the original director and storyboard artist of the series, confirmed that they had to do a lot in order to emulate the art style of Jim Lee while not making it very difficult to animate. One of the most difficult challenges in the world of animation is applying detail to a character and having that character move as fluid as possible, especially when you have a very tight production schedule. If we were going to implement that crazy Sakuga style animation, it was going to be done sparingly, so most of the time characters' movements were limited in order to retain the detail on them. According to Larry Houston, one of the greatest inspirations behind this method was the 1960s classic Johnny Quest.
What I also tried to do was, Rick knows this also a little bit, was that we both grew up with Johnny Quest, with Doug Wildey. And one of the things he did to make the show work really well is that he didn't have a lot of animation, but man, those pictures looked so good on TV. You didn't mind that they didn't move a lot. And a little bit of that logic I tried to put into the show.
And as you can tell by the animation, they've done everything that was done back then, except with modern technology. But if you've actually watched the show, then you already know that they don't mind stepping out of that pocket and breaking their own rules in order to deliver some of the most breathtaking sequences I've seen in animation. We saw it multiple times with Cyclops, the junkyard battle with the Sentinels, and almost every scene that involved Madeline Pryor. They're able to fulfill some of the ambitions that the original creators wanted to achieve but simply couldn't due to hand-drawn technical constraints of that time. For example, in the X-Men 97 opening scene, you'll notice that they've recreated a lot of sequences from the original animated series, but they've also taken it upon themselves to add in certain modifications, such as characters who weren't originally in the 90s intro, as well as some of the actions done by the original cast. One shot in particular, which you guys claim you hate, would be when Rogue flips over a Sentinel. If you notice, that shot is extended compared to the original, which is a lot shorter, and that's all because this shot was originally intended to be longer based on the original storyboards designed by Larry Houston. So all this time you guys had your rose-tinted nostalgia goggles strapped on extra tight. You should have loosened them up, or better yet, taken the things off and acknowledged the fact that you had a huge nostalgia trip right before your eyes that gives you all the things that we wish we could have gotten back then, because that's exactly what this show is doing. Now, are the character designs a lot less detailed compared to the old show? Yeah, in some ways it is, but are they effective when they're in motion and the animation is vastly superior? Yes. So let's get off the hate train and actually give this show a shot. It's doing a lot of things well. The only thing that I would change about it, as I mentioned earlier, is the aspect ratio. I would make it 4:3. I would also include more Ron Wasserman music. It doesn't have enough of those Ron Wasserman guitar riffs that were littered throughout all the Saban produced shows such as Power Rangers. But other than that, everything is pretty much stellar. So stop the complaining already. But with that said, guys, I'm going to turn it over to you. Are you liking X-Men 97? And do you feel like the animation deserves the criticism? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, I ask that you like or dislike this video. It doesn't have to be a thumbs up, it can be a thumbs down. But if you really enjoyed the video, it would help me out tremendously if you shared it with all your friends and followers on all the different social media outlets. Sharing is caring. But once again, this is your boy RBG, aka the Random Black Gamer, signing out on another video. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.